In this video, I take an old empty Listerine bottle and turn it into a futuristic military locomotive. When I saw my partner almost throw out this bottle, I looked at it and I thought, you know, that's got a really cool shape. So I thought I might be able to build something out of it. So it's kind of been laying around my studio for quite a while now. First thing one needs to do with these type of bottles is to remove that labelling. And I just used a hairdryer onto that label, and I just heated up until the glue became soft enough for me just to peel off the label. Really easy thing to do. Then I gave it a good wash off camera, and I needed to cut it down the center. So I thought the best way to do it is I had this little bottle laying around, or rather this tub laying around the studio. So I grabbed a marker pen and stuck it to the tub and just ran around the edge. They gave me a nice even line, and then I used the Dremel tool with the cutting wheel to cut it down the center. This is a really easy process, so you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work this out. One of the things I did notice, it wasn't perfectly flat, so I used a bit of sandpaper that was stuck to my bench top and just sanded till I got a nice even level base to it. That was a quick, 5 to 10 minute job. Really easy. Next job I needed to do was to create a base for that bottle. So I jumped into Photoshop, and using my little desktop scanner, I then scanned the base of that bottle, as you can see there. And that gave me an outline in Photoshop for me to actually create it in the next step. Now, I did some adjustments in Photoshop. I adjusted the tone so I get a much sharper line. Then I brought that image into a piece of software called Lightburn, which is the software used for cutting with a laser cutter. I then used the line tool to do a outline of that bottle. I only needed to do one half of it, and then I just copied it, flipped it, and saved the file. I then headed over to my Omtech laser. This is the Proton 40, which is an 80-watt laser. And it literally cut this out within about 30 seconds. Here I've sped it up so you don't have to sit around for that 30 seconds. During this test fit, I noticed one important thing. The bottle actually isn't symmetrical. Even though the bottle looks really even, it's not. It's slightly out of whack. So to fix that, I'm going to need a bit of super glue as well as some masking tape to hold that into place. And I used some super glue accelerator to make sure it held up very quickly. I then grabbed my hand file and then cleaned up the edges. Once that was all complete, you can see off camera, I did give the whole plastic a bit of a sand. The joints aren't perfect on there, so I will need to fill them up with some Tamiya putty. And you do need to sand that plastic down so the super glue's got something to grip to, or else it will just peel off. This step is probably the worst step of any of my builds, is the sanding. I'm not a fan of sanding. I wish I didn't have to do it, but one does. I then pull out my small greebly box and try and find some appropriate detail that I can put onto the locomotive. This is a sprue from my Messerschmitt 262 model kit that I did a few months ago. I gotta tell you, it's been a wealth of some fantastic greeblies. Now, I created this funnel type looking thing. It's more of a sensor in this particular case, but I wanted the locomotive to look like a locomotive, so hence why I created a sensor module to look like a funnel. These are some drop tanks from another kit and just some detail. I wanted some panel details to go on the side of the locomotives, so I jumped back into Lightburn, created this design and cut out 4 of them. 2 for the front, 2 for the back on each side. Now this literally is cutting in real time, so you can see it's an extremely quick job to do. I love this laser. In this particular case I'm using 1mm box board, which is a really thick cardboard. These are my 4 finished pieces, and I'll just super glue them into place. Because it's a cardboard, it sticks instantly, so you've got to be pretty precise when you put it on. You can see some of the greeblies I've stuck on the side so far, including those drop tanks from the aircraft kit. Here I'm covering up the ends of that Listerine bottle, and I've also added these panels just to even out that shape there. So far it's looking good, but as I'm playing with it, I'm trying to get some idea, and it feels like it needs a bit more greeblies, so I'll get to that a little bit later. First thing I need to do, all that box board, that cardboard, I do need to seal it, so I'm using some homemade Mod Podge. This will be a great protection when I go into the painting process a bit later on. Some details to go at the ends of that locomotive. Now this piece will go on the front. Again, this is cutting out in real time. And the thing took me maybe about 10 minutes to design in Lightburn. And this is the piece. When you're using this mixed material, the best stuff to use is either Araldite or superglue to put it all together. These circular details are to represent a boiler, but a futuristic look upon that design. And I've just used a piece of blue tack to help me in holding that piece for me to glue it down. Now you can see I've added some more details, some little circular bits that I've cut out of the box board, and the finished detail on the front there. And I'll be adding a whole bunch of piping in there. So I'm drilling the holes in between those little circular discs. And then I head over to my drawer and pull out some of this 1mm fencing wire. Great stuff. It's really easy to manipulate and shape. And this is really more trial and error as I play around. I didn't even have a plan where I was going to have this piping. I just kind of went with where the holes were and just try to make them interesting. And whatever I did on one side, I duplicated on the other. Again, back to the super glue to hold everything into place. And this is where we're at this point with the greeblies. It's looking good. I'm really happy with that. Still looks like a locomotive, but futuristic. These pieces I also designed in Lightburn, and what these will be the command module, or sort of like looks like the tender. And I envisage every command module to serve a different purpose. So they're all numbered, and just like Thunderbird 2, they get to pick their module for whatever military use or mission that they need. Surprisingly, everything came together in one hit, the first go, and I love it when the plan comes together like that. Super glue is your friend with this box board, and this stuff's 1.5mm. It'll be thicker than the previous detail. Of course, I'm sealing it once again with the homemade Mod Podge, which is a combination of PVA glue and clear acrylic paint. These pieces will make up the little corridor that goes between the command module and the locomotive. Again, super glue, and this was pretty easy to do. I just lined it up so it was in the middle because there was one larger one and a smaller one, and this created a really interesting passageway between the two units. And that also needed to be sealed with the homemade Mod Podge. Now, I needed some bogies, so I found these on Thingiverse. I did make some modification to them, and then headed over to my Elegoo printer, and I'm using some of this SUNLU 14K water-based resin. This stuff is fantastic. It's become my go-to resin. It really gives me some great detail. So off to the printer, and it's going to take about 3 hours to print out those pieces. Also found these on Thingiverse. These are the railway tracks, printed them out as well. Each piece is about 150mm in length, and I needed about 400 all up. The bogies and the track fitted together perfectly. Now, worked out the height of those bogies, and turns out the whole diorama is going to be around at 1/64 scale. I needed 3 bogies for the locomotive, and I laid them down on the track just to make sure everything was spot on and in line. Bit of Araldite on there, and then I adhered the locomotive body to those bogies. The Araldite is 5 minutes, so it gives me a bit of time to play around with it and get it all lined up perfectly before it hardens. Off camera, I created the base out of some XPS foam. That section in the middle, I see that as a huge concrete slab, and that's where they lay the railway track upon. Once I glue all that down, I'll just chop off the excess with a little hacksaw. This is kitty litter. Now this stuff is actually fantastic. I've been using it for years, and I'm just laying down a coat of PVA glue. I then sprinkle some kitty litter on top of that. Now, to hold it all in place, I'm using a combination of some PVA glue, water, and a couple drops of dishwashing liquid. Now, you do need to use that dishwashing liquid because that breaks the tension of the water, and it lets the kitty litter soak it in a lot easier. Another great property of this stuff is once it gets wet, these little pieces go soft. So you can see I'm pushing it down with a paintbrush handle, and that's pushing it into place so it compacts it a lot better. So it looks a lot more realistic. Then when it dries up, it goes hard again, so it never loses shape, unless you push too hard, of course. I've covered the rest of the base with some PVA glue and then sprinkled tile grout on top, and give it a good spritz of some water so everything soaks in. That'll give me an amazing ground texture. Same thing for that concrete slab on top. Now, because it's got PVA glue on there, what I'll do, I'll lay down a track and put on some weights on there and leave the whole thing overnight to dry. 24 hours, and there we have it. That's what it looks like. Of course, I'm going to need to paint all this, but it's looking really good. The ground texture is looking very realistic. The stonework, which stops the concrete slab from moving, is hardened and looks great. I need to even out the color tones, so I'm using some of this paint from MIG and just giving a really mottled finish to it. It took a couple coats to go over that white kidder litter just to even it up with the rest of the groundwork. Then went in with a bit of grey for those sleepers and then some rust colour for the actual railway. Once I've combined all the tones, it gives me a much better sense of where to go to next. Time to weather the whole thing, give the whole thing a spritz of water, and I'm just using some dark brown wash here. Really thin diluted paint to go over the whole thing. It doesn't even have to be an even coat, and then I use some black. That's just some black craft paint that I've heavily thinned out with water. When you're slapping on the washes, don't be too scared to add a bit of extra because it always thins out and lightens once it dries, as you can see there. This is dark sand from Ammo, and this is a dry brushing paint, and what I'm doing here is bringing out all the raised detail with this dry brushing technique. By the way, if you need some dry brushing brushes, they are available from scalemodelgeek.com.au. This light grey I'm using for the sleepers of the railway tracks. That rear command modules needs some more greebly, so I created these in Blender. This is the rear platform and stairs, and this is in 1/64 scale, and that wire work is extremely fine, so it's going to be an amazing test for the printer and resin I'm using. This is the top platform of that module. Again, 1/64 scale, so you can see how fine that work's going to be. So off we go once again using this SUNLU 14K. I have total confidence in this resin, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to get some great results in that wire work. Onto the printer, through the really easy interface of the Elegoo printer here, hit play, and that's only going to take like an hour and 13 minutes to print up. And there we have it. Look at it, how good is that? I'm still amazed looking at this how fine that work came up. A quick test fit to make sure it all sizes up correctly. I printed up a whole bunch of these greaves to go on the side of that command module. Back again to the super glue. Like I said earlier, it's the only thing that you're going to get that's going to stick them together. I started off just sticking one side down and making sure that completely cured before I moved on to the other half to stick down. Once I made sure I had that adherence, when I bent it, it wasn't going to snap off. And because that greebly is so thin, it just bent to the contour of that module. After adding a bit of super glue to one side and then sticking it to the back, I then went in and gave it a bit of a flood of super glue on the inside to make sure it stuck really well. A few drops onto the top section of that module and just plonked that platform down. After doing some research online on some old school locomotives, I noticed they have these side panels. So I created this in Lightburn once again, cut them out with my laser cutter, and then using some super glue for the little spaces there, which I stuck to the side, and then at a later stage I'll add those side panels. Now I'm giving the whole locomotive a base coat of some black primer, and this is actually Vallejo. I'm using their black primer. Nice even coat to start off with, and this unifies all the colors together. And for an experiment, I'm trying some of this zenithal lighting. So I've got some white paint which I'm hitting from one angle, and then with starting off some yellow and then onto some red to create a sort of like a camouflage effect. Let me know in the comments what you think of this color choice. For the weathering, I start off with a wash of some light gray and just flooding the whole thing. Then I hit it with some black, and this brings out a lot of the detail. For the bogies, I used some of this ammo dry brushing paint, which is a gunmetal. Now with that all done, I'm just about to glue on those side panels. I'm gluing them on at this angle because it'll align both panels perfectly at one end. Off camera, I created this cow plow that's on the front. This BioCult bottle is exactly the same as the Yakult bottle, and I'm going to use them as a type of force field generator. Created these greeblies in Blender. Now, I kind of wanted to have it on walking feet or maneuverable feet with some greeblies on the sides and the top. Those legs come up really nicely, and the Yakult bottle, or BioCult in this case, just fitted straight on top, slotted straight on. Easy, not a problem, looks great. And a quick test fit of the side greeblies to see how they came out. And I did create two different types. One to go to the top section, the bottom section. I grabbed some 320 grit sandpaper and sanded the bottle down. Again, so the super glue's got something to adhere to. First piece that goes on is that top plate, then the side greeblies, and you can see there's some that stick out and others that join the two sections together. Then I glued the bottle to the walking feet, and just like that I ended up with a force field generator. The whole thing got a base coat of some light primer, detailed those little greeblies with some gunmetal, and then the whole thing got weathered down with the same colours as I used for everything else. Now for the top of the railway track, I'm using this Sharpie, which is just a silver, and that just shows the railway track is still in use with that locomotive. Let the fun begin. These are a whole bunch of figures that I bought from CG Trader, and just type in Sci-Fi Soldier, you find them that way. I then printed them out and did some zenithal lining. Instead of the black, this time I used a dark grey because I really wanted some subtle shadows because I'm using this yellow as the base colour. Painting up all these identical multiple figures basically turned out to be a bit of an assembly line. I just lined them all up, sprayed them all the same base colour, and once that had all dried, I then went in with a dry brushing brush with a lighter yellow and brought out some of the detail, then painted the guns all silver and also the boots and gloves black. I decided my base needs a bit more life, so I'm using some of this 2mm grass. Some PVA glue, I've pushed that into the crevices between the rocks, and then using my static grass applicator, just sprinkled it over the top of that PVA glue. And to add a bit of variation, I used some of this turf in between those grass tufts. Here I finally get to add the locomotive to the train track. Some 5-minute epoxy resin, just on each of those bogies, and then glued it into place. And then the same process for that command module, or tender, whichever you want to call it. Some super glue onto the feet of these little soldiers, and I placed a couple on top of that module. One look at each end of that platform to show they're looking out for something, just in case, a bit of protection. And just like that, it's all done. So let's go and check out the turnaround images. Did you enjoy that video build? Let me know in the comments what you thought. I had a lot of fun doing it. My favourite bit was that force field generator. I really liked that. In the meantime, why don't you check out some of my other videos, and hopefully I'll see you in my next build.